The first thing that we kind of mentioned yesterday was when they're setting up the tryouts, a lot of times you'll have maybe a day or two, like 2 skates or whatever, where you have to perform, and that's what they're judging you on. So just give me a little bit of your thoughts on what you think of that setup, where you have maybe 2 tryouts and 2 exhibition games, and that's kind of all you get when there might be 40 kids or 45 kids at a tryout and for a team in Windsor.
Yeah, so in this area, I'm going to go 2 different ways.
Yep.
In this area, you've got, if you have a really good populated tryout, like a lot of kids trying out, you're going to have 40 to 60 kids. That would be a lot. Yeah, a lot. That's a lot. That's for this area with a population of around here, about 300,000, 250. Yep. That's a lot of hockey players trying out for 1 or 2 teams. Whereas you're in the GTHL, you have 60 would be very small. So what it is in here, this area and several areas, this would be the Alliance or OMHA, stuff like that, Ontario Minor Hockey Association. What it is they give, this is when you're allowed to have your tryouts, on starting here and ending here, and it's a very short time frame. So I think in this area it was 4 days or 6 days.
6 days, yeah.
Okay, 6 days. There's 2 organizations here, and that's similar there. So you have to give someone 2 chances to try out, and then you can release them or sign them or whatever. At the same time, the competing team is doing the exact same thing. So if you release players, then they get to choose, but then they have it at the exact same time, so it's chaos.
Right.
So at the 11th hour or the 12th hour, people are going, I got released. Can we go on this team? You try to get tryouts, and you kind of almost have to grant a tryout almost. Yeah. So you have to do extra tryouts, but so that's an issue. In the Toronto area, it's not. There are tryouts, and I guess the same would be here. There are tryouts, but there's also, it's not that difficult, especially in a population like this, to know who the top players are. So they're called tryouts, but are they really tryouts? That's the other issue.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
Like if you play,
you kind of know the team.
You know the team, you know the area, right? It's not like if there was someone playing for the AAA team, you know who your best players are. Now you all know who at the next level. So you're playing Major Bantam, let's say, or we call it U15 now. And if you look at the U15s from the previous season in the next level, so the travel AA, the AA centers and stuff like that, you know who the best players are, for the most part. Can someone surprise you in a tryout? Yes, but for the most part, you have your mind almost made up at that point. Okay, so is it enough time to look at a player honestly? No, it's just not enough, and because you're not, it has to be in a game situation to see if a kid can play. The other issue is what if you have 7 goalies try out and you got 4 sessions and you play, like a lot of these teams will do drills and stuff. It's like, well, that's not how you even tell a hockey player. So let's just say you have 4 different games, you got 7 different goalies, and they get in the net and they don't get a shot for their half of the game. It's not even fair. It's not even right. So it's not a really good way to evaluate people anyways. Mm-hmm. But what do? Yeah. You have to do something. So my thing on that is that people have a really, really good idea who the top dogs are. Mm-hmm. And then to go to a tryout or to have a season before and challenge for one of those positions, it's totally possible, but you would have to be on the radar probably before that.
Right. And I think,
or grow 6 inches in the last 3-4 months.
That just really jumps out. Yeah. I think when we were talking yesterday, the kind of the thing I said is most of the issues that come around tryouts are more or less for the 5 kids, the bottom 5 kids on the team that get signed, or the 5 kids that almost made the team that got cut. Yeah. So there's like a 10-person.
I would agree.
Around a 10 player range of kids that will be affected by the issues of tryouts. I would agree. Right, and how the system works. Because if you're outside of the 5 kids that got cut but almost made it, it's like you weren't really going to make it. Like you didn't really have a good shot at making the team anyways. Yeah. So how much more time did you need to be evaluated? Probably not a whole lot. So if you're going to be, if your kid is 27th on the depth chart when there's 15 skaters, it's like, should you really be upset that the tryout's only 2 days? Not really. Yeah. And then on the flip side, if you're one of the 5 kids that makes it, but you're the bottom 5 kids and you're in that squirm position of you're on the bubble or whatever and you almost got cut, that's where those kids can kind of feel the heat. Yeah. So I think it's really all of the issues in terms of how tryouts are set up kind of are geared toward those 10 kids. Now, to me, there's surrounding things that happen that don't need to, because, you know, to your first point saying how there's no perfect system and that kind of thing, that's true. But there's also stupid things that are done that don't need to be done that just cause further issues.
Yeah.
So the next thing I kind of want to touch on after that was kind of how a lot of teams will like sign kids early, or some variation of that, where it's like a big secret, and then there's like a big announcement that the best 12-year-old signed early or whatever. So I'll let you hop in with some thoughts on that, and then I'll pipe up after.
Yeah, that's the part where,
you know what I mean? Like, this is unnecessary stuff.
It's unnecessary. Like when you're looking at youth hockey, see this is the part. Like, okay, so let me just go back to the tryout phase.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the issues that kids, it's not to be discouraging at all.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm being very realistic with parents, coaches, and players right now. If you're a 13-year-old hockey player trying out for a team, and you haven't played on the AAA team yet, or the AA team, whatever, but I'm going to talk AAA. You haven't played on that team yet. You have to do something very outstanding to make that team. Or you have to do something very outstanding to make that team. Maybe it was the previous season, or when you get to tryouts, like you're like just over the top good.
Yeah.
Because the other issue is, as a coach, is a lot of the times it's like, this kid's had his AAA socks on since he's 9, and now he's 13, because you get labeled early. Right? So if you're labeled as a AAA player, which we see all the time, and at the time you see kids starting to go down, 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 you see other kids come up, 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 and there's a point where it's a balancing act. And though the question that people, parents, players, and coaches have to ask is can I make the jump, or can I stay here? Am I good enough to stay here? And both have to have a dose of reality. Because if someone was just really good, and we talk about it, and I've seen it all the time, there's certain kids I use as examples all the time around here. It's like, this kid had a hairy chest at 11 or 12. Of course he's better, but he never got better, right? And this kid is starting to get better. At some point, this kid's going to be better, but the coach has to make a decision. Do I keep the devil I know, or the devil I don't know? And a lot of times they hang on to this guy 1 more year or 2 more years. So it's very, very tough for that new guy to come in and make that team.
Absolutely, yeah.
Unless he does something really good, or this guy goes to the philosophy, which would be my philosophy if it's based on winning and developing. My philosophy is there needs to be a change every year. And like, I learned this from a very, very successful businessman. He goes, he has to turn over the most unproductive, like he calls, I think, his bottom, less than a third, but about a third of the guys in his corporation. He has to turn them over because they're useless at some point. So he has new fresh blood. So anyways, that's that. So it's something to keep in consideration. And as a parent, preparing your kid for that tryout, to know that it's very, very difficult to make, not because you're maybe not good enough, but because of that issue. It's just like, you got to replace someone, and it's really close, and do they actually take a new guy that they don't know? So you have to earn that spot. And then once you get there, it could be, then it's like a non-issue. Right. It's like the OHL, right? NHL. People have contracts. People are in, that's your team, and then it's for someone else's job to replace that. This guy has a long leash, needs to fail a few times before this guy actually takes over.
Yep.
So that's that.
Yeah, and it's not that that's wrong either. Like, people that listen to you say that will be like, well, that's not really fair. If this kid's better, he should make it, whatever. And it's like, not really, because your kid hasn't, like we talked about with rookies coming into the OHL, you haven't played any games at that level yet. So people don't know what to expect. So you're not just going to be given the same chance as everyone else right off the hop necessarily, unless you are that outstanding kid that really just blew the doors off at Tryouts, which that can happen. But if you're one of those kids and you think, well, my kid's now better than this kid, and they still cut my kid just because XYZ reason, and it's not fair, and it's politics and all this kind of stuff, it's like, not really. It's not really. It's you know what I mean?
It's not yet.
Yeah, it's like if I've seen this kid play for 3 years in a row at the AAA level, and I have a question mark by him now where I don't know if he's sticking there or not, and then I got your kid coming up, and it's like, okay, he looks pretty good, but I haven't seen him play at this level yet. That's a fair question, and it makes sense as a human to go with the thing that you feel is a little bit more safe, especially if you're in the position of a coach, right? So that's an important thing to keep in mind.
And conversely, is you have the kid that tried out at U8 or U9 that made the team, and all the kids haven't tried out yet. So it's now he's been on the team for 2-3 years, It's like they feel like, oh, I'm just on this team. It's like, well, not really.
Exactly.
So a lot of times they have a hard time letting go of that hockey player.
Yep.
When it's like, no, it's time. They're done. They're not good at this. These other 3 kids are better than this guy by a long shot because it's just the way it goes.
That's a really good point too, because then you get the sour ass on the other side too, where it's like, well, how could they do this to my kid? He's been on this team for 5 years and whatever, right?
I can't even tell you. Like, I know a couple of people, their kids played AAA for a year, and they're Charlie's age. They're 17, 18 years old, and they still consider their kid a AAA player, but they only played 1 year when they were young, and they got cut.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, you're not.
Yeah, you're not.
You made it when it was bad. So, anyways,